We're going to tell a different story than has been done before. And we're going to tell a collective story, not a hero's journey.
Historically, culturally, given the patriarchal society that we live in, women are never seen as people who can make decisions on money.
Coming from Zimbabwe in Africa, there was hardly any admiration for people who were wealthy. And I think that was really informed by the inequalities that were in our society.
What little you have, you share it with those who need it.
I certainly didn't grow up with wealth.
I was raised by a single mother. She taught me that money was valuable and important, but also hard to get.
Regarding money, usually I think women are the ones that are like the masterminds behind how you organize wealth within communities.
We started talking about what's needed in philanthropy, what's needed to nourish women's movements.
Would this fund be helpful? And if it would be helpful, what would it look like? What would you actually need?
Funding from women, led by women.
It's not so much that I love scarves, it's that I'm not happy with a bald head. There, how's that? What do you think? How's that? So I'm sitting in my jammies and I get a phone call from Sherry and she said, "You need to sit down. A group of people have come together and we're going to give you some money." There were two conditions on the money. The first, that I take a break. And what's the second condition? That you do something with the money that you think will help advance women's human rights.
Came together because they realized that there was a real lack in the international women's funding. One thing we realized, though, is very important, is you can't just have the money sitting there in your office in the Midwest, hoping that activists or women who are doing the work in other areas will know about it.
In some ways, it seems so simple. And in some ways, it was just like cutting out all the middlemen. Let's just take women of wealth and means and let's do what we can to raise these funds, and then let's get them in the hands of women who know what to do with them at the time that they need them.
I came into the feminist movement looking at it as a career. It's the first time in my life where my purpose and my employment finally aligned. The country had its third coup. I was making a lot of press statements, we were doing protest marches. Then I started getting threats from the military to stop what I was doing.
Go back! Go back! Go back! Go back! And it was an army imposing its will. Go back! Instead, it was increased intimidation to force his resignation.
And we can't give in to his demands.
Do you regard this as a coup that's unfolding? Of course.
The military rocked up and they just said, "You need to come to the military camp." For hours, we were just interrogated and just threatened. They basically took the two of us down to a ground with a cricket pitch in the middle. In that time, I really did think, this would be, this is going to be it. And then they just said, everybody get up. And I just started running.
To work with women who were literally on those front lines, who had been through the kind of violence, who had seen their daughters, sons, children, husbands. I mean, the violence is absolutely extraordinary. And we did it year after year after year.
Don't have good networks, you can't compensate. If you don't, I think that's where we're talking about the human communication. That's what. That there's some sort of fundamental things that we all believe in and agree to as our sort of ethics in the world, or our way of being in the world.
I got to go to AWED, which is the Association of Women in Development conference. They bring feminists from all around the world. There was a session going on, and the session was, what's the point of a revolution if we can't dance? And it was the Urgent Action Fund. And so we were talking about how our phones were being tapped, and we felt that our emails were being, people were reading our emails. And my colleague said, you should apply for a grant. And I was like, really? What kind of grant? How does this work? And she says, maximum of 5,000. You can apply for a security or well-being grant.
The concept was to provide small amounts of money very quickly to enable women human rights defenders to make a strategic intervention at a moment in time.
My colleague and I went to our room and wrote that proposal.
Philanthropy has failed feminist movements by ignoring them, just not resourcing them at all. For decades, feminist movements have been critically under-resourced. We expect feminists to fight battles on behalf of all of us for all of our rights, but we resource them with a pittance. Are you ready for the day?
The feminist force that was emerging globally from the work of so many women, activists, philanthropists, women and their allies who saw a new way of looking at social justice and social change. Oh my God, we can look at this from a different vantage point, and it gives us creative new ways of solving problems. And women are really good at solving problems. That's what we do.
By the time we got home, which was like a 2-day trip, the money was sitting in our bank account. Just feel seen and heard.
Feminism calls for us to decentralize because we believe that the best ideas and leadership and resourcing can be found in the regions where feminist movements exist. Power is not something that can all be centralized in one institution, in one region, particularly in the global north, and seek to be relevant, accessible, or meaningful in other parts of the world.
Oftentimes, the structure of philanthropy in itself was a reflection of white supremacy, a reflection of patriarchy, of misogyny, of all of the things that movements were fighting against.
We are shaking the systems of power. We are transforming how it is that philanthropy currently works. Decentralizing power means a lot of things, but certainly it means that decision-making around distribution of resources is being determined by the people who are mostly closely impacted by the challenges that they are trying to resolve. And it is in that regard that it was important that power be decentralized, but also that power be embodied by the people who are actually bringing the results home.
Trust is everywhere. Without it, our model would collapse, I think. I believe one of the core values of feminism is trust. It should be trust, it must be trust. I trust you that you know best what will work on your context, with your community, in order to feel more, safe, protected, secure, and also how to, advance rights when an opportunity arises. It's when we take our applicants at face value. It's when we seek out advice from our advisors and trust them that they know the movements and activism in their countries and their regions better than us, and that they have a say in who and how we fund.
I think feminist activism takes a really big toll on individuals and on families. Other women, when we would ask about sustainability and they're on the front lines, it was like there was often like a disconnect in terms of like, how do you actually lobby for or like advocate for sustainability when people are dying? What does sustainability look like on an individual level, on an organizational level? How are we taking care of the founding mothers of our movement as they're getting burnt out?
It's a cost. You pay the cost of that kind of activism, that kind of commitment to anything you believe in deeply. Our bodies can only take so much.
Movements are not just structures, they're people, and there's feelings and there's emotions. And I think philanthropy doesn't oftentimes allow for that. And feminist philanthropy and resourcing does. It allows us the space to say, wait a minute, before we get into the rage, before we get into formation, let's just check on our people. Let's just make sure everybody's okay.
When the coup happened, that's when the personal became political. I was able to leverage that power to be able to make resources, particularly to my fund, move differently. And they started to see things differently because I had a completely different perspective. that they couldn't ignore. I think there's a lot of money out there, it's just in the wrong hands.
I think that what excites me is this willingness to look at our mistakes, this willingness to change, and this like outside of the box thinking that is really unique to feminism, that just tears labels down and says, all right, we're going to do this a different way than it's ever been done before. We're going to tell a different story than has been done before.
I think that's the liberatory power of feminist movements, that they don't take their cues or ask for permission from others about who we all get to be, who we are, how we live our daily lives, how we express ourselves. And, you know, the patriarchy is deep, it's deep.
The vision should be, we shouldn't need philanthropy. Really shouldn't need philanthropy, and we should be working toward that. So what are the models to replace philanthropy, and what are the steps we're going to take to make that happen?
I do think as a feminist movement, we can't all scream the same note. We have to like carry out our own part. And then carry the chorus forever.